Welcome to Mythology in the Humanities, HUM 2310. This is an online course. What I'm going to be doing in this series of videos here is I'm going to be mixing up a little bit, talking about mythology, giving you some advice on taking this course, and then talk about some of the boring syllabus stuff. The syllabus is posted on Canvas. You want to go to Canvas and take a look at the syllabus. I'm not going to cover everything that's on the syllabus. That would be just too and terribly boring. But just a little bit for like the first day of class kind of thing. Actually, we aren't in class, we're online, but you know what I mean. Well, when you do look at the syllabus, the first thing you'll see is my contact information. You see my name there. I'm Dr. James Manley. I'm the instructor for the course. My office is in Building 2, which is what most people on campus call the Science Building, although we have other stuff in there now besides just science. If you come to my office, you may not notice that's my office because the sign on the door says Honors Institute. That's because I'm the director of the Honors Institute. That means that I give out lots of money. If you have a GPA of 3.3 or higher, I encourage you to apply to the Honors Institute as what's called a Track 2 scholarship, and I will get out my big shovel and shovel you some money. My email address, I don't give you my email address because I prefer that you use the messaging system in Canvas to contact me. That way, automatically I have your name, what section you're in, all that kind of thing, and that saves me a lot of backtracking later. Well, you're going to find out more about me as we go through the semester, more than you want to, I'm sure. On the syllabus, you also see I give you a course summary. By the way, I rarely show you things on the PowerPoints and then read to you from the PowerPoint, because I find that annoying when people do that to me. I can read a lot faster than most people can talk. But that's a summary of the course material. Mythology in the Humanities. I started teaching this course on campus a few years ago. I forget how many. The instructor before me had a crazy name for this course. It was like Mythology in Art, Music, Literature, Sculpture, Philosophy, and something else. And I said, that's a crazy name. That's a dumb name for a course. So I thought, why not just call it Mythology in the Humanities? And so I went through the process of changing the name for the course. And then I looked at it for the first time after it was changed, and I thought, that's a pretty dumb name for a course. Anyway, I'm not quite sure what that means. Mythology in the Humanities, I'm not quite sure. Anyway, we're going to be focusing our attention on the myths that come out of ancient Greece that are eventually picked up by ancient Rome as well. We'll be bringing in mythology from other parts of the world, the Eastern Mediterranean in particular, but that will be our focus. That's going to be our focus. Mythology. There we go. That word mythology comes from two Greek words, mythos and logos. And the interplay of these words is kind of interesting. Mythos is a Greek word. It means a story that you tell somebody with your mouth. There's another Greek word for a story that's written down. That word is historia. You might have already guessed. That's where we get the English word history from. It's the Greek word historia, a story that's written down. This comes as a surprise to some horrible high school history teachers who thought that the English word history comes from some Greek word that means memorize list of presidents in order or something like that. But history is a story. It's a story that's written down, but the kind of story that we tell people by mouth, the kind of story you tell around the campfire, the kind of story that grandparents tell their grandchildren about the good old days. Well, the Greeks called those kind of stories mythos. Logos is another Greek word. If we wanted to translate that Greek word into English, we'd have a choice of two English words, because the Greek word logos means two different things in English. We could translate it by the English word thought, or we could translate it by the English word word. Because that Greek word logos means thoughts that can be expressed in words. In other words, rational thought. Thoughts that can be expressed in words. And so depending on the context, you would translate that as either the thoughts that are in your head are the words you use to express those thoughts in conversation. Now that's what those two words literally mean, but they come to have different connotations. The way that the ancient Greeks thought about things. Mythos was a way of getting at what is true through a story. Not that the story itself is true, but that the way you tell the story, the parts of the story communicates a truth that is outside the story. It's a way of expressing truth in an indirect way. Logos comes to mean the kind of expressing truth in terms of studying things. Logos comes to mean truth that relates directly to reality, a one-to-one correlation between the word and the way things really are. And it's interesting to have these two ways of thinking about truth in one word, mythology. Mythology is the study of trying to come up with a way of analyzing mythos, myth, a way of telling a truth which is not directly related to reality. In other words, the story may not be true, but it tells a truth in some way. There's a split among the ancient Greeks in how between mythos and logos, and let me get to could have gone there a quotation from a book by a philosopher named Gordon Clark. Greek philosophy began on May 28, 585 BC at 6:13 in the evening. Now we could have a lot of fun thinking about what might have happened at 6:13 in the evening on May 28, 585 BC that launches Greek philosophy. I'll go ahead and tell you in a minute. The way that the Greeks thought about philosophy. Well, today we would divide what the Greeks thought about philosophy into two different things. About half of what the Greeks called philosophy, you and I would call philosophy. When you and I use the word philosophy, as an academic study at least, we think about asking kind of abstract questions. Questions like, how do you know if a statement is true or not? Is there a truth? Is truth a real thing? Or questions like, what does it mean to be in love with someone? Or questions like, what makes something beautiful? Or questions like, is there a God? Does God exist? Now you may know, you can take courses in philosophy. I teach courses in philosophy here at CEF. You can take courses in philosophy where you sit and you train your mind to work through these kind of abstract questions. You can even major in philosophy. My undergraduate major was in philosophy. The other half of what the Greeks called philosophy, you and I would call science. Science asks questions about the physical universe. Questions like, what is water made out of? Or questions like, how does the heart circulate blood through the body? Or questions like, does the earth go around the sun? Or does the sun go around the earth? Or don't they both kind of go around each other while they tumble through space? But what the Greeks thought about philosophy, you and I would call both science and philosophy today. What happened at 6:13 in the evening on May 28, 585 BC? A solar eclipse. Why is that a big deal? That's because a Greek philosopher, a Greek scientist, a man named Thales, had tried to come up with a way of explaining what a solar eclipse was. And he thought, maybe if I go back and look at all the records of solar eclipses, I'll find a pattern. And he goes and he takes a look at every time somebody wrote down when a solar eclipse had happened, and he did, in fact, find a pattern. And he was able to predict several months in advance that on May 28th in 585 BC, they didn't even know it was 585 BC at that point, that there would be a solar eclipse, and sure enough, there was. And it didn't take long after that before Thales discovered the cause of a solar eclipse, the moon passing between the Earth and the sun. Well, now we have a different way of thinking about things, you see. We have a scientific way of thinking about things. We don't need to have a myth about, some big angry dog taking a bite out of the sun to explain a solar eclipse. We have a different way of explaining it. But thinking about that older way, the mythological way of explaining things, is kind of interesting. I hope you get to understand some of that as we go through the rest of the course. Well, that's a brief look at what mythology is. Next week we'll be talking much more about different types of myth and all that kind of thing. This is back to the syllabus now. This is what are the learning objectives. You've had a chance to scan down the learning objectives, or what will you learn in the course. And you'll notice that I've bolded the word inheritance there. A big part of the inheritance of Western culture comes to us out of ancient Greece. And in the next video, I'm going to be talking about some of the ways that we've inherited these Greek myths and how they affect our culture today.